Well, thanks a lot, Andy, and I hope everybody's having a very good day today. One of the things that's interesting and why we teach this program is generally about 2 or 3 times a year I'm teaching beginning security, what you need to know. And someone will come walking up to me at the end of this class, their hair is on fire, they say to me, I don't know what I'm going to do. When I took this job, they told me all I had to do was robbery training and write a report to the board, and now there's all these other things. Other times I have people ask me directly, what is it exactly I'm supposed to do by the regulations? What is it that I have to handle? And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through. We're going to show you at the start of the program about the regulations and what you really need to do. We're going to explain to you that you will pass the regulatory exam normally in security without a problem. The reason for that is that the newest examiner is going to be assigned to review this. They're going to take a checklist. They're going to take a look and see, do you have a written security program? Check, 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 you're fine. And a lot of institutions take that as, well, we got it made. We don't have a problem. That is until the day of a lawsuit. And on that lawsuit day, they discover that what would pass the regulators won't pass an attorney. And one of the reasons for that was the regulators are focused on protecting the insurance funds, while a lawyer's going to be focused on how did you protect physical security, people, staff, account holders, and the public at large. The regulations are pretty uniform, coming from the Bank Protection Act, and on this particular slide, we're showing you what, depending on who you are chartered with, whose regulation you have to comply with. For the credit unions online with us today, I'm going to point out that the NCUA 12 CFR Part 748 is very sparse. The NCUA, back at the time that they implemented the first regulations in 1968, had most of the credit unions inside factories or other locations. What they did in 2002 was issue a credit union letter, number 02CU12. Now, that letter is duplicated in your handout material. What that's going to tell you is basically you're responsible for the same things that are in the regulations for the banks. But they didn't put that out as a regulation. It came as a letter, financial institution letter that you should comply with. That letter, if you were ever to go into a lawsuit, is going to be what you're going to be held to. So we'll discuss that as we go through, too. Also, there's some state and local ATM regulations. I've seen it where a local area would say that an ATM can only have so much lighting because it was a tourist area and they didn't want it to overpower the areas around them. Seen it the other way, where they're demanding it that there's better lighting. And at this time, there's something like 31 states that have regulations on those ATMs. We're not going to go into what exactly those regulations are. But we are giving you in handout material a night inspection form. We'll show you about that a little bit later, too. And sometimes we find that there's other local laws. So for the state and local laws, you will have to do a little bit of research on that, depending on where you are located. But what we're going to take today is Regulation H. And Reg H is all of them have been drafted pretty much the same. And it tells us right off that the member banks are required to adopt an appropriate security procedures to discourage, and this is important, robberies, burglaries, and larcenies, and to insist on the identification and prosecution of people who commit such acts. Well, that's really nice. And the second one states that it is the responsibility of the board of directors to comply with the provisions of this section, and that you have to write a written security program. Folks, if you have to report to the board in person, and you get in front of the board, do not do what I did one time, and what many people will make this mistake, and that is to tell the board, you've got to comply to this regulation. That is, that is a responsibility assigned by the Bank Protection Act. It'll shut them off. They won't listen to you too much after that point. As one board member said to me directly one day, I know, I'm on the board of directors, I'm responsible for everything. And he was absolutely correct. Almost every compliance regulation starts off with the board of directors are responsible. So when you're trying to make points with them, trying to train them, that's not something you want to talk about. The bank security procedures and what we have worked with delve down to what's required by the regulations and the other category of other duties as assigned. Each institution runs the security officer position just a little bit differently. But the board of directors must designate a security officer, and you have to have authority subject to the approval of the board. You want to know, if they've made you a security officer, that has taken place, that it has been voted on the board level. And you would like a copy of the page where that is in the minutes, or at least the ability to refer back to it. And I like to see that right in the written security program. On this date, the board of directors appointed me as a security officer, and that gives you the authority to move forward. It also has a reference to see when it was. There's sometimes when I look at some of these old security programs that people have never updated. So the person is the institution the last 2 years is a security officer and nobody's made a change. Now, what is it that we are responsible for in this written security program? When I look at written security programs, sometimes people hand me a manual that's about 3 inches thick and say, that's our program. It really isn't. I want the security program written to answer just the questions here, and policies and procedures to be separate. I like that because policies and procedures you can make changes with. If you go to the board and you hand them a binder, it's 3 inches thick, and say that is our policies and procedures and that is our written security program, and it's approved by the board, then technically to make changes, you got to go back to the board to get their approval. So if you want to change the way that people enter in a particular branch or something, you could get into a little problem. So I like to keep the two things separate, and that, depending on the subject matter expert you're working with, can go both ways. But what is required is to have a written procedure for opening the office. I should point out that under this regulation, it does not differentiate that it's a banking office. So if you have a mortgage office, you have some other subsidiaries, so to speak, dealing with you, well, they also have to have an opening program, and there is no differentiation. You have to have a written procedure for closing the office. Now, when you're closing the office, a lot of institutions really don't follow their procedures all that well. We need to know that you are following that procedure, because the closing procedure at night is really setting the basis for the opening procedure in the morning. We also have to provide for the currency and safekeeping of cash. Well, let's talk about this written procedure for opening the office. A lot of institutions are now considering opening with one person. And I am totally against that particular situation. And the reason for it is I can take that one person home hostage at night. I can take that one person hostage when they arrive in the morning by hiding around the area. I can do all sorts of things. I like to see a two-man procedure. I like to see that written up that we're going to do it that way. So one person arrives at the institution. It's when the second one arrives, the first one goes in, checks out the inside of the institution, makes sure everything's all right. When I have them go in, I want them on a cell phone so somebody can hear what they're saying or hearing when they're inside going around. And then I like to see the person come back out to the vehicle and go back in. A lot of times, institutions don't want to take these type of things seriously. And that's where I come up with the need for night inspections. This is a financial institution. It was 2 a.m. in the morning. I got involved one time with a financial institution that lost $1 million on one mugging at an ATM machine. And if you stop and think for a minute and you say, well, it didn't even contain $1 million, that was the cost of taking care of the legal work, people being away from their desk and testifying as to what was going on, and then the actual cost for consultants to come in and get ready that were not covered by insurance. Taking care of the cleaning of the institution, this particular branch, during a night inspection, I pulled up to it at 2 a.m. in the morning, and boom, all the lights are off outside.